Welcome to the Camila Gornia Show. This is the Heart Behind Hustle, episode number 2, and today we are talking with Melissa Cassera, who is an LA-based screenwriter and an award-winning marketing consultant. And we're talking all about redefining balance and really understanding how she's able to juggle these two amazing businesses that she has and still create amazing success for herself and for her clients. Now, a little bit about Melissa. She has been named one of the nation's top personal branding experts by Huffington Post, and her insights have been featured on NBC, ABC, CBS, and Fox News, as well as in Glamour, Redbook, Fast Company, and Forbes. She's the creator of an online training program called Obsessed that helps business owners, writers, and entertainers build raving, obsessed fan bases. Her first movie, Girl Followed, currently airs on Lifetime. So I'm super excited to talk to her about balance and many other things. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. All right. Hey, everyone. I am super excited to introduce you to Melissa. So you guys already know a little bit about what she does and how incredible she is. So I wanted to just dive right in, and I want to talk about the hustle side. So we talk about the hard, we talk about the hustle, and I really see hustle as just creating and taking action and like doing amazing things. So what I wanted to start talking about is how I actually know you, which is your entrepreneurial work. So something that's really amazing before we actually talk about this is very often whenever there's a question about whose newsletters do you read, Melissa's name always pops up because she is so impeccable with just her writing and just how she shares content and everything. It's just amazing. So I want to say that first. But you have a really cool course called Obsessed. Mm-hmm. And I was in this course a couple years ago. I think that was the first time you did it. And yeah. It was, just amazing. And I wanted to just talk a little bit more down the path of that. So I know that you have this course. Is this the only thing that you sell within your business? Are you just like course focused, or do you do like one-on-one work, or like how does your business structured?
Mm-hmm. Well, that's changed quite a bit throughout the years. So I've been in business for 11 years, so a really long time. But currently, yes. And the reason why it's structured that way is because I have a dual business. So I do both marketing work and screenwriting work. So because of that, I don't have a whole ton of time. So I actually love one-on-one work, but just don't have time for it right now. So the way things are structured is I teach my year-long course, Obsessed, which you were in already. I do have a little digital on-demand course about newsletters. So funny that you brought that up to teach you how to write newsletters like me. And then actually this year I did a short mastermind. It's actually wrapping up at the end of the month, and it was called the Obsessed Squad. So what it was it was a hand-selected 20 people from previous Obsessed rounds that they had all applied for it if they wanted to be in it. And so I plucked those 20 people that were right for it, and then we spent 6 months together, and that was in a group format, but just a more intimate format than the larger class.
I love that. And I think that's really amazing because you do have those two businesses. And I think that's really amazing that you're able to be successful in both, because you also have a movie out, and that's just like, holy crap, of course. Of course you do. So when it comes to this course, so kind of going back to this, what would you say, I mean, you have been doing this for obviously a while, as you said, 11 years. And when it comes to creating Obsessed, and that's the main thing that you sell within your business, what has been like the main driver for creating that, would you say?
I've always been obsessed with obsession. So I'm just an obsessed person. And if you know me online or even outside of online, I'm always gushing about something, right? I don't just like tepidly like something. I'm always like super obsessed. And so when I got into marketing work, which at this point, I've had my own business for 11 years, but I've been doing this for 15 years. And when I got into marketing work and used to work in agency, I was always really interested in, I worked with a lot of big brands, and I was always really interested in like, how does one brand get an obsessed audience over another, right? Like, how does that happen? I mean, and how do artists and authors and movies and, TV shows. Like, why do some take off and why do some tank? So that was the driving factor for me, is that I just had this obsession with so many things, and then kind of exploring psychologically where that obsession comes from, how other people cultivate or create that obsession within their work. And that's something that I bring into my screenwriting as well. So that's where it came from.
Yeah. And I think something that's really interesting about your work is that, well, the big thing for you from what I understand, it's making business a guilty pleasure. So I love that. And I think that what's interesting, especially nowadays, I mean, something that I see a lot is people like shunning other people for having downtime and like watching trashy TV and like reading magazines. And it kind of blows my mind that is happening. And what I love is that you have embraced like every single thing, and you've really made things about you that are personal into like you as an entrepreneur too.
Oh my God, I have to say something about that really quick. Like, drives me crazy. Because I totally agree with you. There's definitely a lot of that shunning. And one thing I see so often with entrepreneurs or hear is like somebody will say, like, does anybody have any book recommendations? And then all of a sudden, like, people start chiming in and they'll be like, oh no, I don't read fiction, only nonfiction. And I'm just like, oh my, please stop. Like, stop. Because ultimately, the best storytelling is in fiction, right? I mean, it makes sense when you sit down and think about it. I think that they're just not thinking in that realm, right? It kind of common sense makes sense that like you would read a book about like how to build your mailing list or how to do this, right? And like thinking that is going to improve things. But really, a lot of the success in business comes down to storytelling, to emotion, to connection. And that is all done through excellent storytelling skills. And that's one of the things that's rarely taught, simply because I think it's not as sexy sometimes, or doesn't sound as sexy as like some of the other ways that we can approach things. And also I think a lot of people don't know how to do it, only because if you haven't come from like an ad agency background where that's all you're doing day in, day out, or a writing background, right? So if you're not writing fiction, writing screenplays, like you're not going to have that background, right? If you don't have a creative writing background. So it's totally understandable that it's not taught as often as it should be. And so, so my tip is always like, please read more fiction. Don't give up the nonfiction. There's some great nonfiction books, but please soak in fiction. And if you hate reading, like, then watch TV, right? Then watch a movie, like go treat yourself to the movies, because you'll still soak in those storytelling elements by watching. It doesn't have to be, and podcasts are another way. If you hate watching and reading, go listen to something, listen to Serial, listen to S-Town. Like there's so many amazing podcasts that are like true crime or fiction, or, things that are not just like how to build your business podcasts, like this one, which is an awesome podcast, but make sure to mix it up with some other things too.
Yeah,
right?
no,
like,
absolutely.
Don't just use the business advice.
And I think, I mean, the way that I like to look at it too is, this is something I see a lot with my clients, and I will tell them, okay, go, be visible, like, just post and stuff like that. And the difference between the people that actually succeed with that strategy versus those that don't is people that are talking at their audience versus with their audience. And that's really where storytelling comes into play, because when you're telling stories, you're talking with your audience. You're not being better than them. You're not trying to like teach only. It's like you're engaging them. And I think that is so valuable. So I love that you said this, because I mean, like, shit, I love Netflix. I love watching shows and
watch it.
Yeah. And I read fiction all the time. And, it just blows my mind that like there's people, which is why I wanted to specify what hustle means to me and like within my podcast, because I don't see it as working 24/7. I think that's a recipe for disaster, for burnout.
Absolutely.
So I love that you mentioned this. And another thing that I wanted to talk about when it comes to obsess specifically. So a lot of times what we see in terms of advice out there is that you need to niche. So whether people are talking just to coaches or just to e-commerce or whatever, what I think is really interesting that you've done with your course is that you're talking to entrepreneurs, but also writers, and also, just creators and creatives of all types. So I'd love to hear if that was difficult in terms of creating the content to make it relevant for everybody? And if not, if yes, and what was the decision to make it broad like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's broad in the sense that there are a lot of different people in different industries and sometimes at different levels of their business, although I think psychologically and emotionally they're all at the same place, but they may be physically at different levels. Somebody may be 7 years in, somebody may be 1 year in. But they're all kind of meeting at the same place in that they feel stuck because they have zero personality in their business and often zero creativity, and don't know how to story tell and don't know why, they're following all of the tips that they've gotten from various sources and it's not connecting or working. And like you said, a lot of it's talking at, not talking to. But it's also about, I still think you can talk to people and sound too much like other people, if that makes sense, right? And so it's really important to incorporate that personality. And that's a really difficult thing to do. I totally have been there early on in my business and thought that I had to be something that I wasn't in order to be successful. And so I completely understand. And so for Obsessed, it's really about giving these actionable exercises in like small bites. So it's rolled out one per week. And each one is intended for you to bring more emotion, more personality, and more connection into your work. So because of that, it wasn't difficult to create it in a way that would equate to any business anywhere, right? Because ultimately the common thread among all of my ideal clients is that they know that they're doing great work or they have a vision of doing great work, but they're still just not connecting. And even some of them are already quite successful in the terms of like revenue or profit, but it's still like something feels off for them. So even I can have somebody that's, already at $1 million and somebody that's brand new to business, and they're both suffering with the same thing, because just because you're at a 7-figure business doesn't mean you're happy, doesn't mean that, you feel yourself. You may be pretending to fit yourself in a box to get there, and completely burning yourself out and being the opposite of what you teach on this podcast, which is hustling with heart. So it's not as far off, I guess. It is widespread, but in the same way, psychologically, emotionally, everyone is on the same playing field. So it makes it really fun. And I design the exercises so that no matter where you are in your business, it'll work. But also you can continue to do them every year, because it's what I do in my own business every year. So that's all I did, was I just took like what is consistent in my business, like what do I do every day, what do I do every year, every month, and then I just work that out into a plan so that it would never be like something you do and then never have to do again. And it has a shelf life. The intention is that you can repeat Obsessed every year like I do in my own business and not have to keep reinvesting.
I love that. So another thing, so I'm curious. So we mentioned that a big reason that people might not be connecting with, their audience or, just people in general when it comes to their business is a big part of it is that they might not be sharing stories. So that's one. Are there maybe like 2 more that you could share that you've seen across all the students that you've had? If there's that one tweak that they can make, they'll be able to connect much deeper.
Yeah, well, definitely stripping out or editing out their personality happens all of the time, and usually happens without even recognizing it. So it usually takes me, part of the things that we do in Obsessed, which is everyone turns in assignments every week and I give feedback. And I would say the most common feedback that I give is like, this is great, but it doesn't sound like you. Like, this is not, like, it sounds like 20 other people or 200 other people could have written it. So that's something that I stay on top of people constantly, because I know that it's quite difficult to do, and it just takes practice, which is another reason why I made my course a year instead of 6 weeks, 8 weeks, because I know it's not possible. Like, that's just not doable to like suddenly poof, your whole personality is in every inch and corner of your business. It's not going to happen that way. It takes practice. So that's really what it is it's a year-long practice. And just like anything else, ballet or, whatever you're into, you're obviously going to start to master it the longer that you're working with it. And then I would say, gosh, there's so many things. There's so many things about connection. I think that the other piece is probably around, fear of what other people are going to think. I get that a lot. And I think the reason I get that a lot is because a good sizable chunk of my audience, they don't really come from the online world. They're not they don't follow the same people that perhaps you and I swirl with or mastermind with. They are much more in the offline world. They have practices, they have agencies. They're looking to use the internet to do business, but they're not an online business. And so oftentimes when they start to see these things, it's like, whoa, well, I don't want to put myself out there so much. What if people start to judge me on the internet? I mean, it's much different when you have a brick and mortar business, or if you have a coaching practice or something where the majority of people come from in-person networking and conferences and things. But now all of a sudden, you're on Instagram, posting your whole life on your stories, and people are going to have lots of thoughts on that. Right. And so, that's definitely a big thing that comes up. And again, that's not something that is really a quick fix. It's something that you get used to. And it's something that happens constantly. I mean, listen, I still am getting used to getting hate mail and nasty messages. I can laugh about it now, but I can't lie and say that occasionally things don't sting, or things, trying not to take things personally. And that's just par for the course as an entrepreneur, particularly someone that's going to put yourself and your work out into the world. You have to expect that there are definitely going to be people that don't like it, right? And it's not really personal. It's just that they're not behind it for whatever reason. It doesn't connect to them, and that's okay. So, you connect with who you're meant to connect with, and then there are lots of people that you're going to turn off, and that's okay. But that's something that gets, it's hard to get used to. It doesn't happen right away.
Yeah, I love that. Thanks for sharing on that. I'm sure hopefully people were taking some notes. So hopefully that's what's happening here. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about with your screenwriting. So you have your first movie out on Lifetime, which is amazing. Congrats on that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the screenwriting part. So how long have you been doing that?
So actually writing, as far as just putting the pen to paper in a fiction sense, in a screenwriting format, it's been about 3 years. I didn't really start to take it seriously in the realm of taking it into a business sense and pitching and things like that until about little over a year ago. So that, took some time. But I believe this in every business, but particularly in screenwriting, it's a really difficult industry to crack into. There's lots and lots of competition. And so you can't get away with shoddy work. You really have to, work at it. And so I wanted to make sure that I had writing samples that were up to par before I even bothered showing them to anyone, because I didn't want the opportunities. I'm a good networker because of business, but I didn't want to network myself and then show people this crap writing, right? I mean, ultimately, it does come down to having good work. I think that that's relevant on the business side too, because I think you can build your list and network and have affiliates and do all these things. But ultimately, if your course is shitty, you're going to eventually shut down, right? I mean, eventually your reputation's going to tank. And so same thing with screenwriting, although with that, you'll just never get your business off the ground because they'll read, you're lucky if people get past the first 5 pages. And if those 5 pages suck, then bye, you're not really going anywhere very far. So yeah, so it hasn't been too long, but.
So it's pretty amazing that you've been doing it I would say professionally, right, for a year and a half, and you have a movie out that people can
Yeah.
actually watch on their like TV.
Yeah.
So, what did it take for you to like, I mean, clearly it takes like it's really difficult. And I actually know a lot of people that are doing similar things, and I can see how much, it's just it's not easy. So, how like what was the thing that supported you the most in making it happen?
hmm Well, I mean, I can tell you more specifically for this movie if you want, like
Yeah,
the actual
absolutely.
story. I have a lot of different goals in screenwriting and things that I want to do. But one of the things was I'm a fan of Lifetime movies. I love them. They're like total guilty pleasure for me. I usually have it like running in the background when I'm working because they're like those movies you can like check in and out of.
Hmm.
Um, and so I always knew I wanted to write a Lifetime movie. And honestly, in the beginning, I was like, I think I'm just going to write Lifetime movies. Like, I think I'm cool with that. I'd still be cool with that, but now some
Hmm.
other opportunities are coming my way. But so knowing that, what I did was I literally tracked down, like, meaning like did all of the research of every single writer, producer, director of every Lifetime movie back to like 2010. Now, Lifetime puts out like 80 movies a year, so that's a
Oh my
lot of
God, they
research.
do?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a lot. So I looked all of that up, and then I started just reaching out to those writers and directors and producers, and just saying to them, like, I really enjoyed this and such movie that you worked on, and like said something specific. And obviously I only reached out if it was authentic. If I didn't
Hmm.
like their movie, I just tabled it, and I'm not going to reach out. I reached out to people that authentically I enjoyed their work. And then another big thing for screenwriting specifically, it's very hard to do outside of Los Angeles. So just as a little side note, I moved my family to Los Angeles. So that was
Mm.
one thing that had to happen. Um, and so when I got here, I kind of did all that pre-research first. And then when I got here, I started reaching out and asking if people would be open to coffee. And I made sure that I, just said, hey, I'm brand new to the industry, just looking to soak up knowledge, not looking to ask you anything, like not to read anything, like, because that's a big thing with most writers is they instantly are like, hey, can you read my
Mm.
script, right? And I know that's annoying for everyone. So I just made sure that I never said that, and that I was always like, no, I like just want to hear about your story. Like, I want to hear about your journey in this career. I'm just like fascinated. So anyway, through that, I had a series of coffee dates and learned all kinds of great stuff. And then one woman that I met with has written and directed and produced over 50 movies for Lifetime. And
Wow.
and we just really hit it off. And during our meeting, she expressed to me how she was at a point in her career where she just wanted to direct. And she had kind of earned that, right? She worked so hard with them that now she's at that place that she can direct, which is awesome. But that means that she has all of these movies on the docket that don't have writers attached.
Mm.
So she said, would that be something you're interested in with me latched on as producer? And I'm like, duh. Like, of
Hmm.
course. So what kind of happened was, initially she wanted to try to sell an original work of mine. Well, I didn't have an original Lifetime movie, like, or TV movie that I had written. So I literally spent the next like 3 to 4 weeks writing one, and I like worked really hard because I wanted to give her a good sample. Normally you would take longer than that period of
Hmm.
time to write a script, but cranked out a 110-page script, made sure I was proud of it, and then I sent it over, and she loved it. There were definitely things that needed to be fixed for the Lifetime audience, but ultimately, like, she loved my character work and all the other stuff that I did. So she then took that to her producing partner team. They liked it, and then kind of what happened, it was like this weird serendipity thing where they had this other project that was tabled. It was just like a one-sentence idea, but they had no writer for it. They wanted to do it because it was very timely. It was on teenage sexting. And so they were like, hey, we can't really do this one right now, but we already have this one slated and budget, and it's like, and a date for shooting, and like, don't have a writer. So do you guys want to do this? And so obviously the
Hmm.
answer was yes. So that's what I did. Fortunately, with Lifetime, the turnaround time is really quick. And it's not like that. I mean, most things, you know, if you're to sell a TV series or something, it takes an average of like 7 years to get, and if it ever sees the light of day. But for Lifetime, the production cycle is much quicker. So typically you spend a few months writing, and then after that, it goes into production, and you often will go on set to do some like minor rewrites while it's filming. And then after that, it's, you know, so that whole project was probably like 9 months total from start to finish to start to air, which was, you know, really quick and exciting to have that. And I have a second one. I don't have a release date or anything, but it just wrapped production.
That's cool.
So I'll have that coming out probably in the next, you know, 5-6 months, maybe even sooner. Yeah, and that's exciting. And then I also sold a TV series, which is really exciting.
That's amazing. You are totally like rocking it. And it's like a fully developed, you know, career that you have, and it's amazing. So I'm curious, how are you able to balance both things? Like, how do you manage to find the time?
Yeah, sometimes it can be tricky. You know, I you know, it's one of those things where I try to slot things in and batch a lot of work. So batching just meaning, for those that don't know, like, you know, doing a whole bunch of work at once in like one cluster in one sitting. What's helped me is that I have an office space here in Los Angeles, and I also have a home office. So what I do is I go to my office space 3 times a week and just write. And I don't even like turn my Wi-Fi on there. Like I don't even like look at my email. Like I'm just completely disconnected from anything except for writing. And then the other 2 days are devoted to strictly my class. And then, of course, like I have this mastermind going, and that kind of sprinkles throughout the week, but I just don't do it like during my writing time. And my writing time in my office, just so you know, is not like a 12-hour blitz. I mean, I totally like, I can't write that long. So I usually max out around 5 hours. So like I can't write longer than like 5 hours in a row. And I take little breaks, but I mean, my brain just doesn't like work that long, and that's pretty common for most writers. Like you can't just sit there and like bang out stuff. There has to be like a stopping time. So that's pretty much how I've been able to manage it, although it's not a perfect world and it doesn't always work that way. And it also depends on the cycle that I'm in. So, you know, for Obsessed, I have that down to a pretty good schedule where, like, you know, the lessons are made and I give feedback, but I have like specific times that I do it. I'm also pretty quick with that kind of stuff, just from doing it so many years. Like it doesn't take me a long time to figure out what someone needs. So I have that down to a science, which is really good. My busy time with Obsessed is during launch, which is like November-ish. So I plan ahead for that and try not to have like other projects going. Although, again, it's never perfect. So it's very possible there could be something else going. In that case, I would just hire more support team to help during that time, and we'll just see how it goes. And then with screenwriting, you know, you kind of know, like if it's just writing. So if I'm hired for a project or I've sold something, you pretty much know what your schedule is going to be because everything's clearly lined out in a contract. I mean, it's like this needs to be here by this date. So it's kind of nice because you know when everything goes. But then what happens when a wrench comes in is when like the studio ones or the network wants to jump on a call, and like all of a sudden they have like last minute emergency changes, and this stuff happens all the time. So you just have to be like open to it. I mean, there are certainly nights that I've had to stay up all night to like make integrate changes, but then there are plenty of days that I don't have to work at all. So it's kind of, it all balances. I just try to have a balance, and I never work on the weekends. So I shut down Friday, you know, by 5, and then I don't do any work over the weekends. It's very
That's
rare.
Good. Yeah.
Because I need downtime, obviously. And then, of course, with screenwriting, another big thing is pitch meetings. So you have to go in and pitch studios and networks your projects that you're trying to sell. But even those are pretty concentrated into specific times. So right now, I'm working on a feature treatment with my manager, and then we're getting close to it being finished, but we still have some work to do on it. Once it's done, then I'll be taking that out. And I mean, meetings are intense. Like I enjoy meetings, but it's just intense on your time, particularly in LA, because most of them are on the west side. I live in the east. So that means a lot of traffic. And so that can kind of throw a wrench into things. But what I, try to just plan ahead when I know that's going to come, and then try not to have like too many other projects rolling at the same time. And that's another reason why I keep my business. This is all my business. I mean, it's literally all an S corp, so it's all under one umbrella. But just in the realm of like separating marketing from screenwriting, I keep my marketing business really simple for this reason. I'm not the type of person that's going to do, launch 7 courses a year and do one-to-one coaching and have funnels and do webinars and like do all of this stuff. I think all that stuff is awesome. It just doesn't fit in my business trajectory, right? And if like I just would never have time for that kind of stuff. And a lot of it just doesn't interest me in where I'm moving with the direction. So I think you just have to be honest with like what you want and the steps it takes to get there. And sometimes that means not doing things that maybe feel like industry norm or industry standard, and you just do you.
Right. Well, I think that's really amazing. And well, of course, your launches probably get sold out every time. So that definitely helps to like plan for. So I think that's awesome.
But I have a whole year to create a waiting list. So I only open enrollment once a year. So that is a huge help when you have, if you're trying to get 100, let's say you're trying to get 100 people into a class, but you have a waiting list of 700 people. I mean, it's, pretty much you're going to fill that, right? I mean, it would be, that's pretty easy to do. I don't want to take away and say that it's like super easy. Of course, there's work to it. But if you do the work, as you've said before, like I send a newsletter constantly, like I'm very consistent in my content. And so if it's people that follow me consistently or on that waiting list, then they're going to wait. And they're going to do it when it opens up.
What has been like the most effective, I guess, marketing strategy or just activity that you've done to support you in growing that wait list?
Just consistent content. I barely use social media. I only do Facebook ads like a few times a year, typically around the launch, or like if I have a fun giveaway or freebie of some sort, a free class or a guide or something, I'll do that. But I really don't podcast. I'll guest on podcasts. That's fun for me. But I don't have my own podcast. So a lot of it is just consistent content. And it's like the same principle that I use on the screenwriting end, where it's a mentor told this to me once. He's like, good work always gets found. And I really believe that because, here in LA, it's like, if you have an amazing script, like no one's going to be like, ugh, I read too many scripts. Like, no, like they're dying for you. So I try to bring that principle into the marketing end of my business, where it's like I try to make it so that the content is so good that you want to digest it. You can't ignore it, right? It is like that binge-worthy thing. And so as long as I'm doing that, I don't have to do much external marketing because my people do the marketing for me, right? Because everybody will say, the one newsletter, this is what I hear all the time. I'm not making this.
I know. I see it.
But a common thing that I hear is, and I get emails every week, is like, you're the only newsletter I read. Well, then they're not just telling me that, they're telling all of their colleagues and friends that as well, their business peers. So that's really how things grow, because it's all just word of mouth. It's all just content. As long as I'm committed to delivering good content when I promise I'm going to deliver it, then that's, successful.
Yeah.
And so, that's really, it sounds kind of simple. It's not simple. It takes a lot of work to do good content, obviously, but I pour more of my heart and hustle into creating good content that I send out when I promise, as opposed to, how can I build my list? And none of those things are wrong or bad. They just aren't my thing. And I think it's just about finding what works for you.
Mm-hmm.
You know, some people are like, love webinars. They're doing podcasts. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, I think that's so great. I wish that was me sometimes, but I'm not interested
Yeah.
in doing all of that. So yeah, it's just like finding what works for you, what you love,
Yeah, totally.
connect to that.
And I think so. I would actually love to connect to balance and that concept of balance, because we talked, that was like a big kind of theme, I guess, of what we talked about today. So I'd love to hear, like, what does balance mean to you and how does it look like for you?
Yeah, so balance to me is just honestly balance. It's not just balance, but it's like what I believe success is. So we'll say
Right.
like balance plus like how I define success. And I define both of those things by how well I navigate the dips and the slumps and the stressful times. Because when things are going good, like anybody can handle that, right? Like we can
Mm-hmm.
all like manage that.
We all know how to
But
celebrate, right? Like,
we
yeah,
all know how to
yeah.
celebrate. Like it's not, you know, like you can get through happy times. I mean, that's easy.
It'll be so hard, but you know.
Right. Yeah, totally. But you know, it's those times and they're inevitable and they happen in every business. Even if you have this huge business, right? That's like growing, 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 things still happen. It may not be a sales slump, but it could be that your staff is quitting on you, you know, or it could be that you're achieving some other growing pain that's come into play that you never thought of. Maybe you're not set up right financially and you're bleeding money, right? You don't have the right corporation set up. So it could be so many things. And so it's those times that, you know, how well you can navigate those that I think truly makes up what balance is. And I'm going through that now. I have a really, unfortunately, my little Lily, who's my little Shih Tzu, who's like on like all my marketing. And like, so anybody that follows me has probably seen her.
Mm-hmm.
She's very, very sick. She's a little baby. She's only 5.
Oh,
And
wow.
she has an autoimmune disease and it's very serious. And less than 20% of the dogs make it past 6 months. So it's really sad. And honestly, it's been really tough. I mean, not just emotionally, but she has to be watched and observed like
Wow.
24 hours a day, basically. I'm pretty much taking her to the emergency room every other day. And so, you know, when I think balance, I'm like, well, I can't neglect my business and I can't neglect what's going on. You know, I have a tea deal right now that I'm doing, like I'm actively in the middle of,
Mm-hmm.
and have contracts and deadlines and things that I need to meet. And so, you know, I really just do what I can to try to stay emotionally balanced for her so I'm not stressing my little pup out, and then also just, you know, just kind of making it work. Like I got my laptop at the hospital and it's like you just got to do, you know, what you got to do, and then also making sure that, you know, you're taking pleasure breaks and downtime. Even as sucky and crappy as things can be sometimes, it is important to take, even if it's like 10 minutes to yourself, just to like lie on the floor and breathe or whatever it is. And so, yeah, you know, when I think of balance, that's mostly what I think about is I don't really think about like balance as how well I balance work versus play or things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I can do that in my sleep if things are all smooth, but how often in our lives are things smooth, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, they may be smooth for a bit, but ultimately there are things that change and, you know, it's and evolve and things happen. So it's all about rolling with the punches and trying to, you know, get to a place where you can roll with them as best as you can and still feel as positive and good in your body as possible.
Mm-hmm. What has been like the biggest learning around that for you? Like being able to actually be mentally strong and mentally balanced?
Yeah, I think for me it was actually recognizing like how many things were wrong with me and how I wasn't taking care of myself. So, and I don't even mean wrong with me, like there's things wrong with me and looks or brain power or anything, but just more like I have hormonal issues and, you know, things that women go through, but often we ignore those signals and signs because you can kind of just deal with it, right? Like it's kind of like, whatever, like it's fine. But then when you have like trauma or tragedy or things that make you sad or depressed. And like, then all of a sudden it becomes much harder to ignore those signs and signals. So, so a lot of it for me has been focusing on self-care, and that's different for everybody, but for me it's like recognizing that I need to sweat a lot, so it's like getting and working out sounds so simple, but like if I don't get that in, then I do feel horrible and depressed. And it is about like just being more mindful and present. And my husband's a dog trainer, so I know a lot about a lot about dogs and behavior. And one thing is like they pick up on our energy. So it's really important for me, like on the drive to the hospital and like while we're in the waiting room, that I'm super calm for her. So she doesn't feel so nervous when somebody just grabs her and takes her back, because they don't know what's going on, right? It's like dogs can't speak to you.
Right.
And so a lot of it too is like putting her needs in front of mine. Like she doesn't have the same resources we do as humans, and just making sure that I take care of myself so I can be as balanced as possible, particularly mood wise, so that when I'm putting her through all of this poor stuff that she has to go through, that she's not like so upset to go into the hospital. And so far it's been working. Like she runs in the hospital every time she goes.
Nice.
She's like, I'm here again. So it kind of works. I mean, it's and then it's like little things like taking her to the park, so that every time we get in the car, we're not going to the hospital. Like, so, I don't want her to equate that.
Right.
So it's like taking her on little mini trips to run errands or whatever. So it's like, there's not this dread of like, oh great, we're getting in the car again. I'm going to, have to get a blood
It's a good dog training trip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My husband. He's
smart. Very smart guy.
Yeah, very smart. He knows a lot. So yeah.
I think a really good lesson here too is basically when you take care of yourself, you're taking care of others. So, because I very, especially women, I really see that, well, I'm going to have to come last, and then they don't take care of themselves. They don't exercise, or they don't just take any time for themselves. And then, they don't recognize the fact that when you take care of yourself, you're filling your glass so you can pour into other people's glasses.
Absolutely.
Like that's kind of how I like to look at that too. So I appreciate you sharing that. That's amazing. And to kind of wrap this interview up, which you've been incredible, of course, I wanted to see if you have some kind of a gift that you wanted to share with the listeners so they can kind of go deeper into the world that is Melissa.
Sure. Yeah. I have a digital guide that I would love to share, which is loops back into what we talked about with storytelling and writing stories that sell. So I would love to gift that to your listeners. And I'm assuming, will you give them the link for that?
Yes. All the links will be in the show notes, but if you want to share the link verbally too, totally fine.
I don't know if I know it off the top of my head. I did not prepare my link off the top of my head, so I will give it to you in the show notes.
Perfect. So you guys have to read the show notes now, so do that.
Yes.
And then for anybody that wants to just like contact you or just learn a little bit more about you or how to get your amazing newsletters, how can they do that?
Just come to melissacassera.com. So just my full name, and you can sign up right on my homepage if you want to get my newsletter. It's really fun. And I have lots of other goodies on my site too. So you can poke around and play.
Perfect.
Binge.
Awesome. Yes.
Get some coffee or wine or whatever. Whatever you want.
Some guilty pleasure in your business, of course.
Of course.
Well, thank you so much for being here, Melissa. It was amazing having you. You've shared really, just a whole like spectrum of things. Like we talked about the business side and the screenwriting side, and like just how to balance and like beyond just what you really like. It's redefining that. So I think that's really amazing. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.